The Last Throw by Sevastian. The lights of the Mandalay Bay ballroom burned hot, a dozen artificial suns casting stark shadows across the competition table. The crowd hummed with anticipation, their cheers rolling in waves as two men took their seats on opposite sides of the red felted surface. To the casual observer, it might have looked ridiculous, grown men playing rock, paper, scissors. But here, under the gaze of cameras and the weight of $50,000 on the line, it felt like a heavyweight title fight. Michael Jameson adjusted his plain blue shirt, his hands resting firmly on the table. He looked calm, but his chest felt tight under the weight of expectation. He didn't come to Vegas to play games, not in the way his opponent might have thought. For Michael, this wasn't about theatrics. It was about keeping a promise.
Sophie's tiny voice echoed in his head. "You can do it, Daddy." He'd promised her he would. The prize money wasn't just a number. It was the key to her treatments, the lifeline his family needed. Losing wasn't an option. Across from him sat David Bourne, Vegas's own, decked out in a sequined shirt that caught every flash of the stage lights. He leaned back in his chair, a cocky grin plastered across his face. David was in his element, feeding off the crowd's energy like a born performer. He tapped his fingers on the table, each rhythmic beat designed to rattle his opponent. David had played this game 100,000 times. It wasn't just luck. It was strategy, psychology, showmanship. He had honed the art of reading people, knowing when to push and when to pull back. The $50,000 prize would be a nice bonus, but for David, the real prize was the win itself, a chance to prove, to himself and everyone else, that he still had what it took. Round 1. Paper, Shields, Rock. The referee stepped forward, raising his hands to quiet the crowd. "Players ready?" David leaned forward, the grin never wavering. "Always." Michael nodded, his hands steady. Rock, paper, scissors, shoot. David's hand slammed down. Rock. Michael's followed a split second later. Paper. "Point to Michael Jameson," the referee declared. The crowd roared, but Michael barely reacted. His hands dropped to his lap as he exhaled slowly. One round down, just a few more to go. David chuckled, shaking his head. "Paper? Really? All right, big guy, let's see if you can keep it up." Round 2. The showman strikes back. David leaned in, his elbows resting on the table. "You know," he said, his voice smooth and loud enough for the audience to hear, "this isn't a guessing game. It's strategy. You sure you're up for this?" Michael didn't answer, his face unreadable. Rock, paper, scissors, shoot. David's scissors cut through Michael's paper. The referee's voice boomed over the cheers. "Point to David Bourne." David stood, throwing his hands in the air like a prize fighter. "That's what I'm talking about," he shouted to the crowd. Michael didn't flinch. His focus remained fixed, his thoughts on Sophie. She didn't care about the crowd, the lights, or the cameras. She just needed him to win. Round 3. A Father's Resolve. The noise of the ballroom faded into the background. For Michael, the world shrank to the space between his hands and David's. His thoughts stayed on Sophie's small, fragile hands clutching his, her eyes wide with trust. "You can do it, Daddy," she had whispered. He couldn't fail her. Rock, paper, scissors, shoot. Michael's paper fell over David's rock. "Point to Michael Jameson," the referee called. David's grin tightened, though he quickly replaced it with a smirk. 2-1? Not bad, he said, his voice laced with forced humor. Michael didn't respond. His foot tapped once against the floor before going still. Round 4. The Gambler's Bluff.
David leaned back, his chair creaking under his weight. "So, Mike," he said casually, "what's the plan? New tires for the truck? Maybe fixing up the house?"
Michael didn't look at him. His hands hovered over the table, steady. Rock, paper, scissors, shoot. David threw scissors again. Michael threw paper. Point to David Bourne. David laughed, standing once more to bask in the cheers. "That's right, folks, we're tied up." Michael sat back, his breathing slow and deliberate. He'd been here before, balancing on the knife's edge of winning and losing. But this wasn't just a game. Not for him. The final round, the last throw. The referee raised his hands again. The crowd fell silent, anticipation heavy in the air. "Players ready?" David nodded, his grin sharp as ever. He thrived on moments like this. The rush, the eyes on him, the chance to make history. Michael closed his eyes for a moment. Sophie's face appeared in his mind, her smile lighting up the hospital room like sunlight through a storm. "I believe in you, Daddy." He opened his eyes and placed his hands on the table. Rock, paper, scissors, shoot! David threw rock.
Michael threw paper. "Michael Jameson is the winner," the referee announced.
The aftermath. The crowd erupted, the noise washing over the ballroom like a tidal wave. Michael sat back, his breath leaving him in a rush as the weight of the moment settled in. Across the table, David sat frozen, his hand still clenched in a fist. Michael stood, extending his hand. "Good match," he said quietly. David stared at it for a long moment before shaking. "Yeah," he muttered. "Good match." As Michael walked off the stage, the oversized check tucked under his arm, he thought only of Sophie. He wasn't sure what he would say when he walked through the door, but he could picture her face already, her arms wrapping around his neck as she laughed with joy. Behind him, David sat alone, his sequined shirt dim under the ballroom's fading lights. He'd lost before, but this one stung. He'd wanted that win more than he cared to admit. Michael didn't look back. He didn't need to. Disclaimer: this story is a fictionalized account inspired by real events, including the events and names of the people involved, and may, for the sake of fictional expediency, also contain amalgamations of characters or wholly made-up characters used for creative purposes. While the narrative incorporates historical figures and events to preserve the historical record, it includes fictionalized elements, characters, and dialogue. The story does not claim to represent the actual thoughts, actions, or experiences of any individual, living or deceased.